So I want to tell you what Maundy means. It comes from the Latin word mandatum, command. We might know it as a mandate. Because on this night, the last night before everything falls apart, Jesus gives his friends a new commandment, a new mandate. Not a new rule, not a new doctrine, not a new theological position to be defended. A commandment about how to be with each other. Love one another. As I have loved you, love one another. And then, to show them what he means, he gets down on his knees and he washes their feet. The teacher, the one they've been calling Lord and Rabbi, the one crowds have been following across the countryside for 3 years, he wraps a towel around his waist and moves from person to person and washes the dirt from their feet. Been sitting with that image all week, because I think it might be the most quietly revolutionary thing in the entire gospel story. I'm your host, Reverend Andrew Graham Shipley, here on the Missiongathering Christian Church Disciples of Christ podcast. And we are still in our series, Unlearning Empire. Today's episode is The Night Everything Changed. Let's get at it. So there's a lot of ground to cover. So let's start with the meal. Because the Last Supper has been so heavily ritualized, so many centuries of liturgy and candlelight and solemn ceremony, that's almost impossible to see it for what it actually was. It was a dinner. A group of friends who have been traveling together, eating together, arguing together, laughing together for 3 whole years, sitting down to share a meal. The Passover meal specifically in some of the Gospels. Which means this is already a meal loaded with memory. This is a meal that remembers liberation, that tells the story of a people going free, that names every year the specific ways empire tried to crush a people and failed. And Jesus takes that meal, already electric and buzzing with meaning, and layers something new into it. He picks up the bread and he breaks it. He says, "This is my body broken for you." He picks up the cup and he says, "This is my blood poured out for you." He says, "Do this in remembrance of me." I grew up in a tradition where communion was a very formal thing. It was very hushed, very careful, didn't happen all of the time, and you had to be in the right spiritual state to receive it. There were rules about who was allowed and who needed to examine themselves first. And I understand why traditions develop that way. There's something genuinely sacred being protected. But I think the formality also, it's obscured something really important. Because this isn't a solemn ceremony Jesus is instituting. This is a meal between friends on a night before one of them is going to die. This is Jesus saying, when you eat together, remember me. Remember what I stood for. Remember the kingdom I was trying to show you. Remember that bodies matter. Remember that blood is real. Remember that love costs something. Every time you share a meal, remember. And I think there's something about that that's more radical than any form of ritual. At least any form of ritual I've participated in. Because meals are so ordinary. Meals happen every day, multiple times a day. Meals are where families fight and reconcile, where friends catch up after too long apart, where strangers become known to each other. Jesus doesn't say, remember me in your most sacred moments. He says, remember me when you eat. Which means every table is potentially a communion table. Every shared meal is potentially a sacred act. Every moment of ordinary human nourishment is potentially the thing he's pointing at. It's not a smaller vision than formal communion. It's a much bigger one. Then we get to the foot washing, and I need you to understand how shocking this would have been. In the ancient world, foot washing was a servant's work, a slave's work. The lowest status person in the household did the foot washing. It was dirty, it was intimate, and it's deeply hierarchical. It communicated very clearly who was above whom. Nobody washed the feet of someone with more status than them. That simply did not happen. So when Jesus, the teacher, the rabbi, the one the disciples have been calling the Son of God, wraps a towel around his waist and kneels down, Peter's reaction makes complete sense. You will never wash my feet. Because this is wrong. This violates this entire social order they've been raised in. This is an inversion of everything Peter understands about how power, honor, and dignity work. And Jesus says, unless I wash you, you have no part with me. Which, if you sit with it and think about the rest of the gospel, that's one of the most demanding things that Jesus ever says to his disciple. He's not just offering to serve them. He's telling them that receiving this kind of service is a part of what it means to belong to him. You have to let me do this. You have to be willing to be served. You have to let the hierarchy go. Not just when you're the one with the towel, but also when you're the one with the dirty feet. I want us to sit there for a minute. Because I think a lot of us, especially those of us who've been hurt by power, are much more comfortable being the one who serves than being the one who receives. Because serving, let's be honest, it feels safe. Serving feels like at least there's some sort of control. Serving means that you're useful, you're contributing, you're earning your place. Being served requires vulnerability, it requires trust, requires letting someone else into parts of you that you tried to hide, the tired and dirty parts and the worn out from this walking this road of life parts. A lot of us have been in communities where that kind of vulnerability was weaponized. Maybe you were raised in a house where that kind of vulnerability was weaponized, where you opened up and what you shared was used against you, where you let someone see your feet, so to speak, and they used what they saw to diminish you. And so you learned to be the one who kept the towel wrapped around their waist, to stay on the serving side, to never need anything from anyone. And Jesus kneels down in front of you and says, let me. what seems like a small ask, that's not a small ask for a lot of us. That's probably one of the hardest asks in the world, but it also, I think, is at the heart of what community is supposed to be. Not a hierarchy of servers and served, not a transaction where you earn your belonging by contributing, but something more mutual than that. Something where the teacher washes the feet and the student lets him. And somewhere in that exchange, the whole power structure gets quietly dismantled. That's the community I want Mission Gathering to be. I think it's the community we're trying to be. Not perfectly, but genuinely. A place where you're allowed to need something, where receiving is as welcome as giving, where the towel gets passed around the table and everyone takes a turn. After the meal, they go to the garden. As they're going there, they sing a hymn. Like, I love that detail there. They sing. And then they walk out into a garden called Gethsemane on the Mount of Olives outside the city walls, and Jesus begins to fall apart. I mean, that's the only honest way to say it. The Gospels use words like deeply grieved, distressed, and troubled. Mark says he was so overwhelmed, he told his disciples, "My soul is crushed with grief to the point of death." That's not just emo, that's an unraveling. And he prays, not with theological precision, not with calm authority we usually associate with him. He prays with a face on the ground and he says, "Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me." He's honest. Honestly speaking out, "Take this away. I don't want this, please." He knows that there's so much pain and hurt and harm. That right there is one of the most important moments in the entire New Testament because it means Jesus was not performing courage. He was not serenely accepting what was coming with divine detachment. He was afraid and he was asking for a way out. He was human enough not to want to die and to die in such a horrible way. I think that matters so much for anyone who's been taught that faith means never being afraid, that doubt means weak faith, that correct spiritual posture is calm certainty no matter what you're facing. Because, friend, Jesus in the garden is not calm. He is not certain. He is not performing strength. He is a person who loves life and does not want to lose it, and is asking God, the God he trusts, the God he calls Father, to find another way. If it's possible, let this pass. And the part that always makes me unravel, the part that undoes me is he adds, "Nevertheless, not my will, but yours." And it unravels me not because the fear went away, not because he got an answer that made it be okay, not because God showed up with reassurance and told him that everything would be fine, but because even in the fear, even in the unanswered prayer, even in the silence of the garden, he stayed. He didn't run. He didn't take the exit. He didn't let the fear make the decision. Friend, he stayed. I think that is the most honest portrait of faith in the entire Bible. Not absence of fear, not certainty, not calm, just staying, even when staying is the hardest thing. Even when silence is deafening. Even when your answer you needed didn't come. I want to name something for anyone who is in their own Gethsemane right now. Anyone who is praying something and not getting an answer. Anyone who is afraid and being told they shouldn't be. Anyone who has asked God to take away something and watched it stay. I want to speak to you right now, friend. You are not failing. You are not faithless. You are not doing it wrong. You are in the garden. And the most honest, most human, most faithful thing you can do is exactly what Jesus did. Stay. Keep praying. Keep showing up, even in the silence, even in the fear. That's not weakness. It's the bravest thing in the world. After Jesus prays these prayers, after Jesus goes through this anguish, they're still in the garden, and this arrest happens, right? They're there in the garden when it happens. Judas arrives with soldiers, with religious leaders, with lanterns, torches, and weapons. And Judas had told them, the one I kiss, that's him. Arrest him. So he walks up to Jesus in the garden where they've prayed together in the dark, and he says, Rabbi, and he kisses him. And I don't know how to adequately convey that how intimate, how devastating that is. The signal of betrayal is a kiss, a gesture of affection, a greeting of someone you love, used to hand someone over to the people who will kill him, who will torture and kill him. And Jesus, even now, even here, calls him friend. Friend, do what you came to do. And then the disciples scatter. Everyone, those ones who said they'd never leave, all those men who boasted scatter. The ones who argued about who would be the greatest in the kingdom, the ones who were asleep in the garden when Jesus needed them, they run. I think we need to hold that honestly rather than rushing past it. Because these are not cowards. These are people who genuinely love Jesus, who had given up their lives to follow him, who would, most of them, eventually die for this movement. When the moment came, they ran. Because fear is real. Because the body responds to danger before the mind can reason. Because love does not always make us brave in the moment, even when it makes us brave in the long run. And I think there's an enormous amount of grace in that. Not excusing the abandonment, but understanding it. Because most of us have been the disciples in the garden. Most of us have had a moment where we meant to stay and we didn't. Where the cost became real and we flinched. Where we said we would never leave and then we left. And the question is not whether you ran. The question is whether you came back. Whether the story of your life has a chapter where you stopped running and turned around and walked back towards the thing that frightened you. That's what Easter is building towards. But we're not there yet. This moment, this night, we're in the garden. The garden is dark and Jesus is arrested and the disciples have scattered. And tomorrow, things are going to get worse before they get better. Maundy Thursday is named for the commandment, love one another as I have loved you. What we've seen in that story about that night is what love actually looks like when it's lived out fully. It looks like getting on the floor and washing the feet of the people you love. It looks like sharing a meal and saying, remember me in the ordinary things. Remember me when you eat. Remember me when you're together. It looks like praying in the garden with your face on the ground saying, please take this away. And then staying to see it through anyway. It looks like calling the person who betrays you so intimately and so harmfully friend. It's not a small love. It's not a comfortable love. It's not a love that keeps you safe or makes things easy or guarantees that people around you will be brave enough to stay. It's a love that costs everything. And it is, I believe, the only love that can actually change anything. Not because suffering is good, not because the cross was planned for God's violence to be enacted on Jesus, but because love, a love that stays when everything in you is screaming to run, that love is the most powerful force in the world. And friends, that's what we're trying to practice here. That's who we're trying to be here together around actual tables with actual meals, with the towel actually passed around, with the fear actually named out loud, with the prayer actually prayed, even when the silence is all that answers back. This is what it looks like to follow Jesus into the hard places. Not performing courage, just staying, even tonight, even in the dark. Friend, I hope you'll stay. I thank you for listening. Next in Holy Week is Good Friday. I'm going to be honest with you, that episode's going to be different from the others. It's going to be quieter and slower. We're going to sit with the cross without rushing to Sunday, because I think one of the things we've been worst at in the church is letting Good Friday be what it actually is before we try to fix it with the resurrection. So that's the next episode tomorrow. Take care of yourselves tonight. If you have someone to go and share a meal with, do that. Once again, Mission Gathering is online and in person. Links are in the show notes. See you on the other side of tonight.